The year I finally pulled out my watermelon vines mid-summer, my neighbor looked at me like I had lost my mind. I had spent 3 months watering, feeding, and fussing over them, and I had exactly 4 small melons to show for it. None of them sweet, all of them taking up a raised bed I could have filled 3 times over with things I would actually eat. That was the year I stopped growing what sounded good and started growing what actually worked. 40 years of gardening will do that to you. What I want to share with you today is the short list. The 7 crops I come back to every single season without hesitation, and the reasons why each one earns its place. We are going to talk about what they give you in real food and real savings, how much space and effort they actually ask for, and how to get the most from each one without wearing yourself out. By the time we are done, you will have a clear picture of exactly what to put in the ground this season and what to leave at the garden center. Before I get into the list, I want to say one thing. I did not arrive at these 7 crops by reading about them. I arrived here by growing almost everything else first and discovering, one disappointing season at a time, what was not worth the trouble. So when I tell you something works, it is because I have grown it through bad summers and late frosts and soil that needed years of fixing. That is the only kind of gardening advice worth listening to. The first crop on this list is one I have grown every year for as long as I can remember, and I cannot imagine a garden without it. Lettuce. Not the iceberg you find at the grocery store. That variety is a nightmare to grow at home and barely worth eating anyway. I mean the loose leaf types. Red Sales, Black-Seeded Simpson, Oak Leaf, Butterhead. These are the lettuces that give you harvests within 45 to 50 days of planting. And because you pick the outer leaves and let the plant keep growing, a single plant can feed you for 6 to 8 weeks straight before it bolts. A 4-foot by 2-foot container or raised bed section planted with 6 to 8 loose-leaf plants will give you enough salad greens to replace what you would otherwise spend somewhere between $8 and $12 a week at the store, depending on where you live. That adds up fast. The other reason lettuce belongs at the top of this list is the effort involved, or rather, the lack of it. You water it, you keep slugs off it, you harvest from the outside in, and that is essentially the whole job. It does not need staking, it does not need trellising, it does not need particularly rich soil. It does not mind a bit of shade, which is a genuine advantage if your garden gets afternoon shadow from a fence or a tree. My mother grew lettuce in a window box on a north-facing porch and ate salad from June through September. That tells you everything you need to know about how forgiving this plant is. There is one thing about lettuce that catches people out every time, and I will save you from learning it the hard way. Heat is its enemy. Once temperatures push consistently past 75 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, loose-leaf lettuce bolts. It shoots up, turns bitter, and stops being worth harvesting. The solution is simple once you know it. Plant your first round in early spring, enjoy it through the mild months, and then plant again in late summer for a fall harvest. 2 short seasons instead of 1 long struggle. Much better use of your space and your patience. The second crop is one that surprises people when I put it on a list like this, because they assume it is difficult. Swiss chard. And I understand why they think that. It looks a bit exotic. It has a name that does not sound like something a normal person grows in a backyard. But I have been growing chard for 30 years, and I genuinely think it is one of the most underrated vegetables in a home garden. It is ready in 50 to 60 days. It grows in almost any soil. It handles heat better than most leafy greens. It handles light frost without flinching. And like lettuce, you harvest the outer stalks, and the plant keeps producing. I have had single chard plants give me harvests from May through November in a mild year. 1 packet of seeds at around $2 will give you more plants than most people know what to do with. In terms of nutrition, chard is remarkable. High in vitamins K, A, and C, as well as magnesium and potassium. I am not going to turn this into a nutrition lecture, but I mention it because this audience knows that eating well matters, and chard delivers. You can sauté it, add it to soups, use it in place of spinach in almost anything. It is genuinely useful in the kitchen, not just in the garden. Now, the third crop is where I expect some of you to push back, because it is not glamorous. Bush beans, not pole beans. I will explain why in a moment. Bush beans like Provider, Contender, or Tenderpick go from seed to harvest in about 50 to 55 days. They do not need stakes or trellises. You plant them directly in the soil, water regularly, and they produce a concentrated flush of beans over 2 to 3 weeks. Then you pull them out and plant something else. One 10-foot row, which takes up almost no space, will give you enough beans to eat fresh for a week and still have plenty left to blanch and freeze. A packet of seeds runs about $2. A pound of fresh green beans at the farmer's market is $3 to $5. The math is not complicated. I mentioned pole beans, and here is the honest truth about them. Pole beans produce more over a longer season, and in theory that sounds better. But they need support, stakes, a trellis, some kind of structure, and they need you to harvest frequently, or they stop producing. For someone with a sore back or knees that are not what they used to be, crouching and reaching through a tangle of vines every few days is not a pleasant chore. Bush beans ask a fraction of the physical effort. You harvest once or twice over their short window, and you are done. For the kind of gardening we are talking about here, that is the right trade. The fourth crop is one that comes with a warning I have to give you before you fall in love with the idea of it. Tomatoes. Yes, they are on the list, but not all tomatoes, and not in the way most people grow them. I have grown more varieties of tomatoes than I can count. I have grown them in beds, in pots, in grow bags, against south-facing fences. And what I have learned is this: the tomatoes worth growing at home are not the ones that require elaborate staking systems, precision feeding schedules, and daily suckering. Those tomatoes are for people who want tomato growing to be a hobby. The tomatoes worth growing for food are the compact determinate varieties: Celebrity, Bush Early Girl, Patio, Tumbling Tom for containers, that stay manageable in size, ripen in 65 to 70 days, and do not need you to spend half the summer managing their growth. A single determinate tomato plant, grown in a 15-gallon container or a generous patch of bed, will give you somewhere between 8 and 15 pounds of fruit over the season. At current grocery prices, and we all know what those have been doing lately, that is $8 to $20 worth of tomatoes per plant, using seeds or transplants that cost you $1 to $3. The flavor difference between a homegrown tomato and a supermarket one is not a small thing, and I think that matters to this audience. You are not doing this just for the savings. You are doing it because food that tastes like something is worth growing. The thing about tomatoes that I want you to hold on to, and this is the part that took me years to accept, is that less is more. 2 or 3 well-managed plants in good soil with consistent watering will outperform 6 neglected plants every time. Do not fill your beds with tomatoes because you are excited in May. Grow fewer, grow them better, and you will spend less time on your knees and more time enjoying the harvest. The fifth crop is one that belongs on every senior gardener's list, and I say that with 40 years of experience behind me. Herbs, specifically the perennial herbs that come back on their own, year after year, without being replanted. Chives, thyme, oregano, sage, and mint if you keep it contained. These plants ask almost nothing. You plant them once, they establish themselves in the first season, and from the second year onward, they simply grow. You harvest from them whenever you need something, they fill in gaps in your beds beautifully, and they quietly save you money every single week. A small bunch of fresh thyme at the grocery store costs between $2 and $4 and goes limp within days. A thyme plant in your garden costs $2 once and gives you fresh thyme for a decade. I grow mint in a pot because it will take over your entire garden if you let it loose in the ground. That is the one thing to remember. But in a pot, it is one of the most reliable and satisfying plants I grow. I use it in everything from lamb to iced tea to a simple glass of water on a hot afternoon. It regrows so fast you almost cannot harvest it quickly enough. The larger principle here, and this is worth pausing on for a moment, is that the best crops for a home garden are not always the most dramatic ones. They are the ones that give you something usable every week, with the least amount of effort required to maintain them. Perennial herbs are the clearest illustration of that principle in the entire plant kingdom. The sixth crop is one that I deliberately put toward the end of this list because I wanted to talk about it when I had your full attention: zucchini. And before you laugh or groan, because plenty of experienced gardeners have a complicated relationship with zucchini, hear me out. The reason zucchini has a bad reputation is that people plant too many of them. 2 plants will feed a family, 4 plants will feed a neighborhood. Plant 1 or 2, and zucchini is one of the most productive, lowest effort crops you can grow. It goes from seed to first harvest in 45 to 55 days. It does not need trellising, it does not need precise soil conditions. It produces continuously as long as you harvest regularly, which means picking them when they are small, around 6 to 8 inches, before they turn into baseball bats. One thing that trips people up with zucchini is pollination. If your fruit starts forming and then shrivels up and drops off, that is not disease, and it is not your fault. It is a pollination problem, usually because there are not enough bees visiting. The fix is simple. In the morning when the flowers are open, take a small paintbrush, or even just your finger, and move pollen from a male flower, the one on a straight stem, to the center of a female flower, the one with the tiny fruit behind it. You will have zucchini by the following week. I learned this about 15 years into growing them, and it changed everything. The 7th and final crop is the one that surprised me most when I sat down to think about which plants had genuinely earned their place in my garden over 4 decades. It is not an exotic vegetable. It is not something that sounds impressive at a dinner party. It is garlic, and I want to tell you why it belongs on this list, even though most people never think to grow it. You plant garlic in autumn, October or November in most of the US and UK, a little later in Australia where the seasons run differently, and you harvest it the following summer, around June or July. That growing window sounds long, but here is the thing. Garlic is completely undemanding for most of that time. You plant the cloves, you mulch them, and you largely leave them alone until spring. They do not need watering through winter. They are not troubled by frost. They come up in early spring without any help from you, and all you do from that point is keep the weeds down and watch them grow. The payoff is significant. A single garlic bulb splits into anywhere from 6 to 12 cloves, and each clove you plant becomes a full bulb. Plant 20 cloves in autumn, which takes up about 4 square feet of space, and you harvest 20 heads of garlic the following summer. At current grocery prices, a head of good garlic costs between $1 and $2. That 4 square feet of garden space just saved you $20 to $40, and if you save some of your best heads for replanting, you never buy garlic again. I have been replanting from my own stock for 9 years. The variety I grow now is descended from a bulb I bought at a farmer's market in 2015. That is the kind of gardening that actually pays. Now let me bring all of this together, because I think there is a pattern worth naming. Every crop on this list shares a few qualities. They are all relatively fast to produce something you can actually use. They all have a generous return for the effort and space invested. They are all forgiving of imperfect conditions, less than ideal soil, irregular watering, the occasional week when life gets in the way and nobody gets out to the garden. And they are all genuinely useful in the kitchen, not novelties that end up composted because nobody knew what to do with them. That is the framework. That is the question to ask about every plant you consider putting in your garden. Does it give me something real, reliably, without asking more of me than I have to give right now? There is one more thing I want to say before I give you your homework. Physical effort matters. It matters more than most gardening content acknowledges. If a crop requires you to be on your knees for an hour every weekend, or to carry heavy equipment, or to wrestle with structures that are always falling over, it will eventually stop being something you look forward to. The best garden is the one you actually use. Every decision you make about what to grow and how to grow it should account for what your body needs from you, not what it needed 20 years ago. There is no shame in raised beds that let you garden standing up. There is no shame in containers that you can move into shade on a hot day. There is no shame in choosing the lower maintenance variety of something because you want to enjoy the harvest, not exhaust yourself getting there. So here is what I want you to do before this week is out. Look at whatever space you have, your raised beds, your patio, your containers, and pick 3 crops from this list that you do not currently grow. Just 3. Write them down. Look up the planting dates for your zone, because timing is everything, and it shifts depending on where you live. Order your seeds or pick up transplants at your local garden center, and get those 3 things in the ground before the end of the month. You do not have to overhaul your whole garden. You just have to start with 3 things that will actually give you something back. 40 years of gardening has taught me one thing above all else. The garden does not reward ambition, it rewards attention. Grow less, grow it better, harvest every week. That is the whole secret, and it fits in one sentence.